came on a charge, and literally at 3 feet, the gun barrel was right there. I shot him in the face. I saw the impact and I dove out of the way.
Hi there, John McAdams here, and you are listening to episode 378 of the Big Game Hunting Podcast. You just heard a short clip from an incident involving our guest today, Julius Fortuna, where he wished he had a double rifle in his hands. That near-death experience for him and his friend at the hands of a charging Cape buffalo made him a firm believer in the benefits of a double rifle for buffalo hunts in thick cover like that. Now, lots of listeners have contacted me for an episode involving double rifles, and that is what Julius and I provide for you in this episode. We talk about all sorts of different facets of hunting and shooting with a double rifle in this episode. We talk about the pros and cons of double rifles versus magazine rifles, the situations they are best suited for, what goes into regulating a double rifle, typical accuracy and maximum effective range of a double rifle, how that changes when you are using an optic or a red dot sight, and the highlights of many modern production double rifles produced by companies like Sabati, Merkel, Krieghoff, Heim, and others. Julius also shares a few stories like this one you just got a teaser for, where the hunter either wished he had a double rifle or had a double and got out of a jam because he had that double rifle. Now, this is an episode where you are really missing out on some important stuff if you are just listening to the audio recording. I have included some hair-raising videos to accompany their respective stories in this episode on YouTube. So be sure to click the link in the episode description to watch the video and get the full experience as well. Now, before we get started, if you want to hunt Africa with or without a double rifle, we do still have one spot remaining for a hunt in the Free State in October 2025. Now, 2025 is full otherwise. We're having a great year, though, and we do still have availability for hunts in March, April, May, September, October, and November 2026, either in Limpopo or in the Free State of South Africa. Visit bestsafarihunt.com for details or email me, John at thebiggamehuntingblog.com to book your dream hunt in Africa. Okay, now let's get started talking to Julius about double rifles. Well, hello, Julius. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today to talk about double rifles.
Thanks. Excited, John, for a good chat. And nothing I love talking more about is double rifles and hunting in Africa. So we're I think we're in the right spot.
Perfect. Now, while double rifles certainly have a lot of romantic appeal to them, especially for hunting in Africa, they are also very practical rifles for some situations, and more than a few hunters owe their life to a skilled employment of a double rifle. Can you share a story of a hunt by you or someone else where that double rifle really came in handy, or it would have been handy if the hunter would have had one?
Yeah, I had a couple different experiences, a couple of them hair raising actually. So one of them was June 28th, 3 years ago, hunting in South Africa. And I was using a very well worn 416, custom 416 Weatherby that I've literally had for 30 years and shot over 750 rounds through it, very comfortable with it. And it's where it was the key turning event for me to determine I was going to a double rifle, and it was not that there was any accuracy issues or concerns like that. It was just simply a matter of I couldn't get my last shot in time. Even though I've 700 rounds, I've been through several of the safari schools. I can literally chamber that drop chamber in 1.5 seconds, which is what the timing was on that event, the Maharaja of Mayhem, which was filmed for actually Tracks Across Africa. Did a nice series on it. It's been 100,000 hits on it. It wasn't that. It was the fact that I did not have time, and I knew I didn't have time when I shot the third shot, and it hit him in the chest and exited out the back of this Cape buffalo, and he was still enraged and coming. His heart was destroyed by the second shot, and I just didn't have time. And I knew 100%. If I would have had my 500 or my 450, the second shot would have been aimed much shorter, much more condensed firearm, much better in the close cover. So that really was the tipping point for me. And just a couple years before that, I was hunting with Buzz Carlton, and we were hunting elephant, and he over a sundowner talked about how he went from his 416 and left the 416 magazine rifle with 5 rounds, just because of the exact same thing. It's just when things are happening inside of 20 yards, the double was made for that. The old two pipe, having two separate firearms in your hand, not only the security of it, but the speed at which it can be deployed is there's nothing out there that can shoot 2 rounds as fast and as accurate as a double rifle.
Well, we'll go back to the Maharaja of Mayhem incident here in a minute to maybe flesh out some other points later on in this discussion. But let's take a step back and talk about the strengths and weaknesses of a double rifle versus a magazine rifle.
Yeah. Magazine rifles, first off, inexpensive. Relatively, it's affordable firearm to go to Africa with. You can get a good magazine rifle. Even you can get a UCZ for under $2,000. You can get the push feed Remingtons, for around the same 1,500, $2,000. So one of the big advantages is low cost and getting a wide selection of calibers and capacity. Being able to have 3, 4, 5, maybe even 6 rounds on some magazine rifles. And it's the reason why, in the early 1900s, some of the PHs, especially some of the one, and not even PHs, but some of the professional hunters in terms of game control work and whatnot, they wanted the extra capacity. And so there's a clear advantage there, especially when the distances get outside of that 10 to 15 yard. That extra rounds, I mean, when you have that 1.5 or 2 seconds to manually put another round in there, it's really it's very comforting to have that magazine stuffed full of big cigar dangerous game calibers and bullets. So that's definitely one of the advantages. Another advantage, and so I'll talk about the advantages and pros and cons on the magazine rifles first, and I have much more experience with big bore rifles and magazine rifles than I do doubles. Doubles I've gotten involved really a lot in the last 15 years, but I've spent, I started shooting 416 Rigby's and 416 Weatherby's and 460 Weatherby's and 378s going back to the early 80s. But the magazine rifle really has that ability to have the accuracy without a lot of extra work. It's very much easier to align and sight up a good magazine rifle. And just in general, those having that extra capacity, having a low cost, having the comfort. I think one of the big advantages of a magazine rifle is that the vast majority of dangerous game hunters going to Africa are very comfortable with bolt actions. Mm-hmm. Many, few are used to a double, unless they're shooting double shotguns, which are can really carry you over when you, which is what I did. I started with my uncle had an old Purdy double 12 gauge, and I shot everything with it as a kid. So shooting doubles were easy for me. But for most people, having that bolt and the comfort and the ability to, chamber, especially under pressure, those are the real 4 big issues for magazine rifles.
Mm-hmm. Well, what about the doubles then?
Yeah. So I'll talk about the advantages of both, and then we'll talk about the disadvantages.
All right.
So for doubles, the advantages are anything inside of that 50-yard mark is just made for it. I mean, it's just such a fast, there's nothing faster for the first 2 rounds than a good double rifle, especially if, particularly when a client can shoot it or a hunter can shoot it well. The other thing I really love about it is it's just simple, and you have redundancy. Simple and redundancy. Speed, simple, redundancy. And the power of nitro express, calibers is just tremendous, especially, being able to launch those 400 grain bullets, at 2,100 to 2,400 feet a second really starts to put a great effect on that. And as you go up in caliber, my favorite is the 500 Nitro Express. That's my go-to, and 570 grain bullets. It's just fantastic for that effect of stopping power.
Mm-hmm.
And so, to me, that's the allure. Is the last part of that is that it's just sexy. I mean, those doubles in Africa, I mean, slung over your shoulder, and it's just. I'm a historian on African safari going back to the late 1800s, and it just brings a whole level of tradition with doubles.
Mm-hmm.
On the downside, on both, of course, there's both, and that's why I really like to have both firearms on safari. For 20 some odd safaris, I had one. I built a 416 Weatherby, literally custom Weatherby to be able to have a single battery firearm, and it was very, very good at that. But having both now is what I recommend to everyone. Being able to have a scoped 416 or a 375 or a 458 if you can handle it. Having a scoped magazine rifle and a double is kind of the best of both worlds. But on the downside for the magazine rifles is that it's speed. It's speed at getting engaged. You have to some folks that like to shoot with everything up here and not drop down. I mean, you have vision issues. You're not looking at as much of the target that way. You're having to either drop or come from the top. I think the magazine rifles have a disadvantage in that it just doesn't have the speed. So I'd say that's probably the number one thing, is just the speed at which you can get to the second shot is the biggest issue.
Mm-hmm.
And then the disadvantage for doubles are they can be the new ones are a lot better at this, but they can be a pain in the ass to regulate and to get them to shoot to the same point of impact. I mean, when you think about a double, people think, well, when you shoot them at 50 yards, and it should be 2 bullets printing on a target like this, and that's not the case.
Mm-hmm.
Literally, if you put a laser in each barrel, you have 2 separate barrels and 2 separate guns. You put a laser in one, and you look at it at 50 yards, and it's low and left. On the left barrel, it would be low and right. And so you literally have to align those. It's almost like, I think it was Chris Sells that made a great analogy at Heim. He says it's like the quarterback, hitting his end as he's running across. You literally have to try to time those so that both of those bullets are hitting to within the same point at 50 yards or 65 yards. So, and I think 50 yards is probably the magic number for them. And so getting them to regulate, the newer ones are really good because they're regulating around factory ammunition.
Mm-hmm.
For years and years, Kynoch was the only ammunition you could use for doubles. And there was about a 25 to 30 year span, in the 70s where they were just dropping off and you couldn't get ammo for them. So a lot of them were sold really great, Hollands and Rigby's that were just sold for dirt cheap because ammunition was a big problem. People that weren't regulating. And so now when you buy a Heim or a Krieghoff, or you buy pretty much any of the mid-tier and entry-level doubles, they're designed for factory ammunition. So if you want to go off that, then you start to get into the regulation issues, dealing with velocity and making sure that they're not cross-firing, which is one of the key nemesis of double rifles, is that the right barrel at 50 yards will actually cross, and you'll be looking at a firearm that's not going to be a viable tool in Africa.
Yeah, my dad has a Cogswell and Harrison double in 500 Black Powder Express, and you can't get factory ammo for it anymore, obviously, and he has been able to hand load for it to make it into a capable rifle. But man, it was a mess getting that thing sorted out at first.
Yeah.
Like you said, the shots were crossing like crazy at 50 yards, and it took months and months of work to get it shooting accurately.
Yeah. And he need, and I don't know if you guys have Graham Wright's book, but if you don't, especially for BPEs, Graham Wright's book is just, I mean, he's got literally a whole chapter on the BPEs. And so definitely take a look at this. There's not a BPE that's missing. And he talks about all of that. And weird things happen. Like, I sent you, one of the targets on my 500, I wanted to shoot wood leg. I wanted to shoot hydros. It's just I'm passionate about that bullet. I've seen what it does in my 416, and I wanted it in the 500. But when we shot factory Federal ammo in that, in my Sabati 500, they crossed, and it was literally like a 3.5-inch group. It was right barrel was over to the left, and the velocity was great. It was like 21, 25. It was great, but it was terrible. And so my gunsmith Ken Owen said, "Hey, we'll fix that." And he did a hand load with 30-31, and 76 grains of 30-31. All of a sudden, now they came back halfway, and then he sped up, put some more powder, went to almost 79.5 grains, and absolutely perfect at 50 yards. So things like that. I mean, if you don't have access to that, with doubles, you pretty much need to stick with, factory ammunition and/or a guy I can't recommend enough is Superior Ammunition. Lonnie Cribbs at Superior. I think you've interviewed him, haven't you?
I have, yeah. Lonnie Cribb is he's been on the show before. I'd have to look up what episode, but if you do a search for Lonnie Cribb Superior Ammunition on podcasts, I can't imagine there's going to be too many results other than mine. But he makes factory ammo or custom hand loaded ammo for darn near any cartridge you could think of. Yep. And we'll tailor make it to your rifle and all of that. And I've never heard anyone that had anything bad to say about Lonnie's work.
Yeah, and I've actually been using them for over 30 years back when Larry owned it, before
wow.
he sold it. And I have old boxes. I was showing Lonnie, I go, look at this box. The color was like yellow, and he's like, oh man, that's Lonnie's days. But the thing about Superior Ammunition is he's got 400 different powders, and nobody has loaded more double rifles than Lonnie Cribbs. No one has loaded more. Even, I don't care if you've loaded for 30 years on one caliber for doubles. He was talking to a veteran, had been 30 years shooting 577s, and just all of a sudden the 577s were just falling apart. He wasn't getting accuracy out of it, all kinds of problems. 20 minutes with him, Lonnie, and problem solved. We figured out what it was. It was the brass. Nobody has more experience in being able to do that. So if you got a trouble double, as I say, you send it to Lonnie. If you don't, you just do the sample packs. He sends you those sample packs because velocity is so important in managing the regulation of doubles. You get a sample pack and you get 4 or 5 different loads, and he knows already what to put in them. And then you just order your ammunition from him. So he makes life a lot easier for double rifle shooters. And certainly he minimizes a lot of the concerns that people have about doubles. And just the last part of that is, most doubles now are regulated for factory ammunition. So you really have a lot, as long as you stick with that factory ammunition and you don't try to change it up, you're not going to run into some of the other issues that are out there that are a deficit for doubles.
So for the listener, episode 251 is Lonnie Cribb.
I'm writing that down because I haven't seen it.
There you go. Now let's back up a minute. You were talking about the main strength of a double rifle is the speed of that second shot. But at the same time, you only have 2 shots in a double, whereas, like you said, you may have as many as 6 in, say, a CZ or something like that. So your second shot is much faster with it. But is it true that, say, your third shot on a bolt-action rifle is going to be faster than your third shot on a double rifle?
Well, that has to do with the individual, and how proficient they are. And unfortunately, and again, we talked about this with the advantages of a magazine rifle is that they're so accustomed to it. Most safari goers, most traveling African safari goers, when they have doubles, they're not shooting more than 40 or 50 rounds to the gun.
Yeah.
And so that's going to automatically slow down that process. I mean, I'm both of my doubles, I probably have, 400 or 500 rounds through them. I just love shooting them. And it's not for everybody. And if you can't shoot more than a box of ammunition, it might not be the best choice. It really isn't, because so many times, I remember Buzz telling me the biggest problem, I didn't mention this before, but the other problem with doubles is that people lean on the second trigger for the second time. Same trigger, boom, hit it again. So without practice, that gap, that third and fourth round is definitely starts to extenuate out. And but by practicing and putting 2 rounds in your mitt, and when you have 2 rounds and you're dropping them in, we're talking about you know, fractions of a second difference between that.
Mm-hmm.
And keep in mind the double, the real change happens inside of that 20-yard mark, inside the 15-yard mark. That's when the two rounds really make a difference in speed. If it's a 50-yard shot, you're better off with a bolt because you're going to have time to move around and have the magazine capacity and all that. And that's why Mark Newton at Rigby said, why not? If you're going to go on an elephant hunt that's 45 or 50 grand, why not have both? Have a scoped 416 or a 375 and then just literally after the first shot you're not carrying it anyway, and they're going to hand you your double. So that's what I would tell you is that when you're using a double properly, it's under 30 yards, and from 30 yards in, that second shot is faster, and so distance and terrain make a difference too on getting to that third, fourth, and fifth shot.
All right, so let's flesh out the example that you gave earlier on your very close call that you had with that charging buffalo on the 416. Can you tell us a little bit more about that story and exactly why that double would have been a better choice there?
Yeah. I'll start by saying that I've had lots of people look at that video and think that I'm shooting a 375.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not. It's a 416 Weatherby shooting a 450 grain Woodley well core at 2,500 feet a second. It was literally Kevin Robinson that taught both of our friends said that setup with momentum of, there's probably 2 or 3 calibers that have more momentum than that. 2,500 feet a second, 450 grain bullet. But it's a custom gun, and there's 2 stabilizers in it. The gun weighs 11 pounds. And so when you look at me shooting that, I'm shooting, one of the most devastating performance bolt action big bore rifles you could ever own. And so you start with that. So the situation was kind of crazy because it's a custom gun. So there's 3 rounds in the bottom. Most Weatherbys only have 2 and 1 in the pipe.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a Justin Sip from Torkerville, Utah, custom built that, custom stock, everything. And one of the mandatory things was I needed another round. There was no question about that. Had I not had that other round, I would probably not be here today. That is a fact. And anybody looks at the video, you can see that. But the story was it was a crazy buffalo. We knew it. The ranch owner, and it's a big 55,000 acre place, a big place, said there was one buffalo. He was crazy. He's got a kind of a bad eye, and man, he's tossed a few people up. He's got people up in trees and cars. Just be careful because if he's with those 6 bulls, he's the leader of that. He's the tough guy. Anyway, as we're walking out, I remember thinking to myself, did I stuff the last round in the magazine? And it's on the film. You can actually see me doing it. I kind of like, wait, let me just double check. I'm like, no. So I put that in there, and that was literally 15 minutes before we had the crazy attack. And Cheetal Safari's Vanner was my PH, great guy. He was in the front, and he said, and I told him I was looking for something that, I wanted to get something around 40 inches, but something that's really hard horned. And if we get a crazy buffalo, great. So I remember kind of laughing. We get that crazy one, we're good. Well, we go after him. My buddy Dominic's behind me, and within 15 minutes, we were really thick stuff. We were tracking him and couldn't see. I mean, there's literally walls of trees, of Mopani trees and camel thorn trees. And the windup was that they came across and they switched. The Mirage Mayhem jumped to the front, and when he came back in there, he turned sideways, and I put the first 416 450 grain bullet right under the chin. I really wanted to go lower, but it hit a little higher than what I would have liked to. Mm-hmm. And that bullet, that 450 grain bullet, went all the way through and was in the intestines. I actually recovered the bullet. And I sent you a picture of that recovered bullet. 450 grains, it weighed like 404 grains, perfectly expanded all the way through. So lungs, top of the aorta, lungs, liver, diaphragm, intestines, and then in the back of the intestines. It's like nothing happened. He starts to run off, and I, just immediately dropped bolt and followed. And the second shot absolutely pinwheeled him. I actually saw the impact right on the shoulder, dead center in the heart, right through the heart. And it was on the hide on the other side. As a matter of fact, when we went to take a picture, it was sticking out of the hide. And it was like, whoa, there it is. We cut it and it popped it out. So it went through both shoulders, the heart, and went out and looked like he was gone. I mean, just they were all running off, and then I could just see him turning, and I just like the blood ran cold. I'm like, oh, he's coming. I just knew it. Once he made the turn, he could have left with all the other ones. Turned, came around that tree, and he's literally looking through the tree where I'm at. And I'm telling you, he absolutely eyeballed me. There was no question about it. When he came around there, unfortunately, Vanner was on, there was a big tree between us. Vanner was on one side of this camel thorn. I was on the other. And he could have went either way. He was actually closer to come around Vanner's side, and then I could have shot, and we could have both shot together. But what happened was he just had a closer path to me coming around the left side of the tree. And when he came for the second shot, Vanner said, shoot, and I hit him with a solid. So this is where I had two 450 grain Woodley weld cores, and then two solids, kind of the classic process, which I'll never do again. There's no reason. Perhaps you should all, if you have good premium bullets as a traveling Bwana, there's no reason to have, I don't think, to have solids. Anyway, the solid hits him in the chest. His leg literally goes down, goes in the chest, and it exits out the hip. Penetrated the whole length. That 416 penetrated the whole length of the buffalo and exited. And when he came around the tree, that's when I knew I wish I had my double, because I knew I would not have time to properly bolt and come back up on top of him. And I just literally remember when he looked right at me, and now he's like, 9 yards away. I remember just going, okay, I'm going to bring this muzzle up. Once I closed the chamber, and literally it was closed the chamber, boom. It was like in seconds.
Jeez.
And literally the muzzle, I just didn't come up enough. I thought I was right. I mean, looking from me to the screen away. And when I came up, that last bit, when I pulled the trigger, the muzzle flash goes around him literally, and the bullet goes in, just misses the brain, goes right out the other side. And you can see the vapor, the gunpowder path going in and then coming out the bottom of the jaw.
Oh my gosh.
when they slowed it, when they have it on a freeze frame, you can actually see the blast here. You can't see because the muzzle's is lifting now, but you can see the blast. You can see where, and then the blast went through the face, and then there's another puff over here.
Oh wow.
And he goes by me, and my cameraman Hinkle Myberg is right next to me, and literally the crazy thing, they said the cameraman never dies, John, and it's true. He said that he dropped the camera like this to his chest, and he just followed him around like this. And when he went by him, the whole camera was full of his blood, because from the heart shot, it was pouring out of his mouth. And so the camera got coated on this side. He got coated his whole body, and I got coated, and his back end hit me as I was diving out of the way. So one of the things I always remembered was in all the books, it's like you lose your rifle, you're out of the fight. Mm-hmm. So I tucked the rifle in like this on the last shot, and I dove, and he blasted into my hip, went around Hinkle, missed him totally. And he had the camera like this as he was moving around, and he said, I'm invisible. I'm invisible. I'm invisible. That's what he kept saying. And he spins around like this. And when the camera goes black, it's because the buffalo's right next to his camera. It's 2 inches away. And he sees my buddy Dominic, who I've been hunting with for 40 years. And he sees Dominic, and Dominic looks at him, and he's like, okay, he's coming. And he started running, and he said he saw this big tree with roots. And then all of a sudden the roots were upside down. The roots. Because I jumped back to my feet, and now I'm starting to load into the magazine, right? And it takes a long time to load a magazine versus a double. When you're empty, it's a lot harder. I'm loading, and as I'm loading, it's like a nightmare dream. I see the buffalo come in and turn his head, and he hit him as he was turning, facing away, and he just one snap like that, and he went up 9 feet in the air. Just feet first, straight up in the air. And as he came down, the buffalo just waited a little bit. He hit the ground. His back foot stepped on him. He went 19 yards and fell over dead without even a death bellow.
Jeez.
And the craziest thing about it, John, was the tracker. I get goosebumps even thinking about the tracker. 3 years, almost to the day, within 3 days, his PH was killed by a buffalo, gored to death by a buffalo. This tracker ran in from the hiding behind the tree that he was, grabbed my buddy Dominic under the arms. He says, "Mr. Dominic, we have to go." And he picks him under the arm, and my buddy was coming to. The tears from his eyes were hitting my buddy's face. And he pulled him backwards. The courage that guy had to be able to do that, to get right back into the battle. The bull was only 19 yards away. And he pulled him to safety behind the tree, and not even thinking about his own self and his own nightmare that he just relived happening right there in front of us.
My
Right.
goodness. Jeez. That is a wild story. So I've seen the video. So for those that are watching on YouTube, I'll play a clip from the video so you can see exactly what we're talking about. And if you're listening to this, well, you can click on the link in the episode description and watch the clip I'm talking about. But it's pretty wild.
That's it. I finally determined that I could take a shot, a chest shot, and I was trying to go mid-stern, maybe a little bit lower, and I squeezed the shot off. Just wait. The reaction of the bull was absolute, like nothing happened. He literally took the shot and was running from left to right in front of me. I bolted and followed, and unfortunately, I don't think the camera caught this, but my second shot was a smooth shot, and I felt really good with the shot. It felt really good. At that point, I thought, 2 good shots, I figured he'd move off and we'd hear a death bellow. Unfortunately, that was not the case here. Through the thick Wapani, and particularly there's a very old growth that blocked my view from being able to see the bull after my second shot. The bull went out and I could just see legs, and he hooked back around, left the group which was walking away from us, and came back around to find me.
Shoot him, Julius. Shoot it. Julius?
Came on a charge, and literally at 3 feet, the gun barrel was right there. I shot him in the face. I saw the impact and I dove out of the way, and he went right by the cameraman, went right by Anko, went right by you at that point.
Everything happened so quickly, but as soon as I wanted to put in my first shot, the angle was just bad, and shot the buffalo. I shot him once, and he just passed me, and shot him again, and he was tossing Dom around in the air. And hopefully Dom is not injured too badly.
Dominic was hit him in the chest, and his whole feet went straight up in the air. It looks like his collarbone maybe dislocated or broken, but my partner is fine. There's nothing else than that. And literally he had 5 or 6 lethal rounds in him at that point, and he went by after the double 470 hit him. And then he literally died over here about 25 yards away.
Close range shot on a buffalo. Make a good but not great hit with the first shot. Make a great hit with the second shot. And the buffalo runs, stops, turns around, and comes back. And so at that point, if you would have had a double during that pause, there would have been enough time, empty it, plop 2 more in, could have shot him again that third time. And you think that if you would have had the double, that fourth shot, you would have had enough time to bring the rifle up and aim it a little bit better and brain that buffalo at 3 yards or something instead of what happened.
Yeah, and I think that is a great point. That's how I feel about it. And a lot of the pros, my friends that are PHs that looked at that, said the same thing. The important part of that is that when I bolted from the third to the fourth shot, it was 1.5 seconds. 1.5 seconds. So it's about as fast as you can throw a bolt and put a big, long action into action.
Yeah.
Even with that, it still wasn't enough for me to come back up to aim. And I totally, I'm more like the Zimbabwe trainers like Kevin and others. I'm not of the school of trying to, bolt up here with the gun up here and doing all this stuff. It's not me. I go with the way the PHs that I've been trained, which is drop, have your peripheral vision, use gravity to your favor, not trying to throw a long bolt back here, which is the number one. Oh, I didn't even mention this. Absolutely, with long actions, short stroking is a huge problem. PHs talk about it all the time. You look at videos one after another when people are short stroking, they think that they're far enough. Their adrenaline's dumping in their system. Their hands are getting soft. It doesn't have all the full strength. When that happens, it's so easy to short stroke an action when you're up here, where if you drop it, you're literally going down using gravity. You still keep your peripheral vision instead of trying to, literally pull a bolt back to your fist. So I did it the way I feel. It was pretty fat, and it still wasn't enough. The double would have been just bang on the third shot, and literally I would have been centered on the brain. And I really like, I like the express sights, but I really do like the red dots, and my dot would have been right on top of his brain. And I think he would have been skidding. It would have been a Mark Sullivan, my old PH. I think it would have been a Mark Sullivan death at my feet.
I think I was just about to say a Mark Sullivan brain shot right at your feet like that.
And he was my PH. We hunted in Tanzania in the Selous in 2006. We had a 21-day safari. It was a lot of fun.
Well, I would like to talk to you more about Mark Sullivan in a minute. Let's talk very briefly about you've touched on it a little bit, but about realistic accuracy from a well-regulated double and realistic effective range.
Yeah, I think again it's pilot controlled. I can people that if you spend any amount of time with a double, you can ring a 10-inch gong at 100 yards regularly. Certainly from sticks, but just even offhand 50 to 100 yards is probably it. I watched Mark shoot. We had a couple depredation tags when we were there on the last few days. The Selous game department asked us to take out an extra 3 buffalo. I was like, oh, they twisted our arms. I watched Sullivan. I shot 2 with my 416 as a group was running by, and Mark shot 1, and then it just hit a gully and it came up over the top, and it was 140 yards going for like a bat out of hell, and he ring that thing's bell with the 577. And just poleaxed him. There was mud in his face. Poleaxed him 145 yards, bang.
Jeez.
And he just rolled it. It was the coolest shot ever, man. But so I think 100 yards is really the number, and I think accuracy wise, I really like the way Heim does their regulation and their number. Their number is 4 shots, 2 inches, 50 yards. 4 shots, 4 inches at 100. That's a very well regulated. That's why you pay more than the entry level doubles to get either a Krieghoff or a Heim. And I think the Heim is probably the number one PH double in Africa today. But yeah, I think that's the accuracy you can expect. At 25 yards, I can stack. Literally bulls are stacked up on one another, especially from sticks. I think, remember, you're dealing with 2 pipes. So, there's difference even in velocity between one barrel and the other. But, and so you have to look at, standard deviations on that. There's a big thing. It could be as 80 or 90 feet a second difference between one barrel and another. But the secret is if your gun is regulated to that 50-yard mark and it's shooting a 2-inch group, you're great. Yes, closer is better. I have several friends that can, really shoot those doubles well, and they shoot 1 inch. They shoot a half inch. You can do that. I have a Savati 450 that can shoot a half inch at 50 yards. It's just fabulous, but those are rare.
Yeah.
The gun is made for that 2-inch mark at 50. And if you put a scope on it, especially, when you're over 40, you start to get that 40 to 65, your eyes start to not be able to regulate as well. And keep in mind that open sights, a 2 millimeter front sight at 50 yards, it's covering 6 inches of the target. It's covering 11 inches at 100 yards. So, that again, those are limiting factors for it.
So did you say 2 inches, 4 shots at 50 yards, and 4 shots, 4 inches at 100 yards?
Yeah. And I used to do the Graham Wright is really, to me, he's like the godfather of double rifles. He was the one that literally got me excited about my first double and what I need to do with it to get it to shoot right. I learned so much from that man. But he does 6. He says you really need to have 6. So right, left, right, left, right, left. And then you look at that group and then you determine, how you're doing. I'm pretty much like of the Heim thing. If I get 4 shots and they're 2 inches, you're doing good. If it's less than that, it's golden. And I think a 4 to 5 inch group at 100, and those groups shrink when you put a red dot on it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care if you have young eyes or old eyes. When you're covering up 6 inches of the bullseye at 50 yards with an open sight, with an express sight, the difference is clear as a bell when you look in and you just have this illuminated dot on there. And so you shoot better.
Yeah, so that was going to be my next question, right? So as we wrap up with accuracy, 4 inches at 100 yards is just obscene for a bolt action rifle. And but we're talking about a rifle here that is designed for use on dangerous game at close range. And so even with even a 6 inch group at 100 yards, that's still more than enough for a shot on a buffalo at that range. And you're probably not going to be taking a first shot anyway on a buffalo at much further than that. So tell us about a red dot sight or a scope. I've seen them on doubles sometimes.
Good.
But it seems like it's one of these things that it can be very utilitarian, but the purist out there would say that that's not what you're supposed to do to a double. So tell us a little bit about that, what you've seen, what you've done.
I asked that question of Mark Newton when we did our campfire podcast, and he had a great answer, and I'm going to poach it. He said, "Do what makes you feel good. Do what makes you feel comfortable." Mm-hmm. A 3.7, because they make a lot of 3.75s, even the 450, 400s, relatively pretty good velocity, at 2250, that kind of thing, or, the 375s and the doubles. I've seen a lot of them with scopes, low power variable scopes, 1 to 8, 1 to 6, 1 to 4. And I think they are very utilitarian because you can put new mounts on them to take them on and off instantly. Mm-hmm. The mount that I'm passionate about, and Heim puts it on theirs when clients ask for it. Krieghoff does the same. Everyone's getting on board. It's the German Ziegler mounts. I don't know if you've seen those. They're fabulous. It's literally you pull 2 tabs in, pull it back, and it comes right off. It's a claw mount. They just claw underneath it, and I literally have it on my 416 Weatherby, and with my 1 to 8 Swarovski scope, I can take that thing on and off. I travel with it off. It's amazing how quickly they come back. So the utilitarian part of it is actually accurate. If you feel good and you want to put a low, because let's face it, at 100 yards, and let's say the average is on buffalo is 60 yards, 65 yards, but it could be 75 to 80, and you're on the last day, 13, 14 day of your safari, you're traveling, go on. I mean, put that scope on there. If that makes you more accurate, doesn't matter what it looks like. Mm-hmm. And I like the tradition. I like the heritage. I get it. If I had my dream rifle, which is, Rigby Rising Bite, if I had one of those on there, I'd still have a red dot, but I'd have it so I can take it on and off and you'd never know it. To me, that's the advantage of it. So scopes, in terms of, variable scopes, yeah, with the smaller caliber doubles, I think it makes sense. I don't think it makes sense when you're talking about a 450 or above, 470, 500, 577. I don't think it makes sense to put a full variable scope on there. Mm-hmm. But I absolutely do think you can, especially if you're over 40, you can really improve your shooting and your ability to put rounds on target quicker with a red dot. And I'm a 3-gun shooter. I've been shooting red dots for 25 years. I tried all of them. I think some of the Chinese ones are a little bit, I don't feel comfortable with them, shooting a 450 or a 500 nitro with them. I just don't. But I absolutely feel comfortable with a Trichon. I absolutely feel comfortable with an aim point. Those are on military rifles and have been for 25 years. They sit on machine guns. So they can absolutely take my 4 or 5 shots that I'll do on safari without ever having a problem with them. And so then when you look at the red dots, this is my answer to the purists who argue with this. And everybody, you shoot what makes you feel comfortable. Again, a lot of the really expensive doubles, nobody wants to break up the look, but you're not there for look. I mean, you can take it on or off. So when you want it to look a certain way, take it off. But the thing is, every firearm speed event has two classes. They have an optical class and they have an iron sight. And the iron sight is 50% behind many times from a speed perspective. There's a reason for that. There's a reason why the military have them on there, law enforcement have them on there, and there's no reason why they shouldn't go on a double rifle, especially now. I see Krieghoff is putting them in as a standard, as a factory option. I see Heim now also is doing it, because let's face it, a vast majority of the folks that are going there to Africa to hunt are over 40. That's not prejudice. That's just the way it is. When you look at the clients, the vast majority of them are older, and their eyes are not focusing on three planes the way they focus on a single plane. Fast, both eyes open, not one eye closed, closing out 60% of your vision and blocking off all the bottom of your target. It's all exposed and open. So I think the red dots, the Trichicon, the new one, I've had it for a year now. I used to shoot almost exclusively on the doubles, the SRO, which is this big round that has the most field of view, but it's a single dot. I really like, and I had the RMRs before they came out with the HD. I have them on my AR platforms and everything else. But the new RMR HD is a bigger, taller version of the original. Same size, still 8 ounces, all compact like that, and it has a dangerous game reticle. It's got a circle dot reticle. And I've just loved the circle dot reticle. To me, it's just absolutely one of the best optic viewpoints, view that you can get on a game, because you got a big dot and then you got a small dot, and it comes up really quickly. So the RMR HD2 is the brand new one. They're about $800. And I fell in love with it. As a matter of fact, one of my PH buddies at Lukop, he just had 3 charges happen. Yesterday, he was in Zimbabwe in Matetse, and he had an elephant charge with him and his partner in Zimbabwe, and at 12 yards, he had to defend his life, and he had 2 Cape Buffalo charges again with the RMR the HD2, fantastic optic, and I highly recommend them. So there's 2 different types, by the way. So we have the reflex types, and then you have the ones that are sealed emitters, which is the aim point. The sealed emitters are just big and square, and there's no chance for any type of dust or anything to build into them. So they're much more for combat, and I have sealed emitters on my AR platforms. I love them, but for dangerous game and for safari rifle, the compactness of an RMR or the SRO in Trichicon is a fantastic choice.
Yeah, those Trichicon red dots seem to be really popular among PHs, at least that you see on TV anyway, that are carrying a double. I had a client that came over a couple of years ago. He had a Krieghoff double in 470, and I didn't know what the name of the mount was until you just said it, but he said that it was a proprietary one that was German, and he had a Trichicon red dot on it. Like you said, older guy, trying his best, but his body just wasn't what it used to be, and so, but he said he could shoot that thing really well with that red dot on it. And he got a nice buffalo and had a great hunt and all of that stuff. Now, it is great to hear that the newer modern production doubles are often compatible with a red dot. You don't have to deface them in any way, some would say, to mount it on it.
That's a great term, defacing. Yeah.
Yeah. It would seem to be almost a crime to have to drill and tap an old Holland and Holland or an old Rigby or something to do that, though.
Yeah, fair enough. You don't have to do that. It just clamps right on it. It works really well. But yeah, no, I had two of my PHs, Brendan Nell and Bushnell Safaris and DJ Meyer, both. I brought them those Trichicon RMRs. They put them on. Brendan put his on 3 years ago. It saved his life on 3 charges. Recently, just even a month ago, he got charged. And literally, he texted me and he said, "Jules, you can't believe that dot was just glowing there, man." And it just, and that buffalo. I mean, it's a great video too. The buffalo comes in. You really need to get him on the podcast. Buffalo comes in and he just drops him at 10 yards. And he said that just glowing. And then he had a lion, same thing. Lion came out of the brush 5 yards away, same thing. And DJ had 3 charges in the last 2 months. Crazy. And again, that RMR HD, the bigger version of it, it does make sense. And like I said, I think if I had a Holland and Holland Royal, or I had a, an original Rigby, rising bite, I would just make sure that, as Mark Newton said, you don't even know it was on there. So you don't deface it.
Yeah. Yeah. So with the right mount, you could definitely do it then. Good. All right. So tell us a little bit about some of the modern production double rifles that a lot of people use.
It's probably the coolest thing. I attribute, my mentor in the business is Craig Waddington. I've been a fan of his, Craig's, for years and years, and going back to the late '70s when he did his first articles. I really believe it was on Craig's back that we have the excitement around double rifles. He literally brought it where there was not ammunition for them. They were just almost relics, becoming relics. And so he, through his writing and then through his videos and productions, it's really come back around a lot. The problem with doubles, and I didn't mention this, I should have said, is the cost, right? So it's absolutely a downside. So it was an advantage for the magazine rifles, but it's a disadvantage, and it's still a disadvantage for a journeyman going to Africa. That's it's expensive, and so the last 20 years, the entry level doubles that have hit the market have really changed the game. So you can get, one of my favorite brands is Sabati. They had big problems when they first came out, when Cabela's had them. They were called the Cabo Sabatis. They were CABO. They were the Cabela's versions of those. There was about 100 of them, and they were as nutty as squirrel poop, and they were crazy, and so they were not regulating well. The soldering that they were using on the regulation was terrible. They would basically use one rifle and then build all the other doubles off of one rifle instead of regulating each and every one with a wedge in the front and all the right stuff. They weren't doing that, and they were terrible. And a friend of mine, who became my gunsmith, Ken Owen, out of Tennessee, who I think is one of the best double rifle gunsmiths on the planet. He's retiring now, though. He's been in it, and he's getting out of the business. But the first Sabati came out, and there was some problems with them. But then from there, once they resolved the problems, it took 2 or 3 years. Ken did took 70 of those rifles back, re-regulated them. I have 2 of those original ones, those Cabo original Sabatis. I have one in a 450, shoots half-inch groups. Literally, it shoots as good as a bolt action does at 50, and shoots 1-inch groups at 100. And I have a 500 of the original ones, but they're Ken Owen modified. Took the barrels apart, resoldered them, put a mercury stabilizer in the back, changed the stock, glass bedded it because they were cracking stocks. They had problems. But what other companies learned was there was a market. There was a market for those $5,000 to $12,000 doubles. And once they fixed the problem, they couldn't keep them in stock, John. They were flying out the store. Still now, I looked on Guns International. I think I only saw 2, that were for sale, and the price was between $6,500 and $8,000 for the newer EDLs.
That's a great price. Jeez.
Yeah. Those were newer EDLs. They were not the older versions. They were not the 92s like the Safaris that I have. These were the EDLs, and these were the big 5 Express. And so I've had 13 friends, either own myself or 13 friends that I've fired and been a part of those guns. They're beautiful, and they work very well. They're very accurate. They don't have the fit and finish of the mid tiers, but they're really great entry levels. And you can get those from anywhere from, I paid for my 450, $4,500 up to $8,000, that range. Then you have the Merkels. Fantastic doubles, the 140s and the 141s, the 140 AEs. I see a lot of PHs that have them. Trying to think of a couple I know that just love their Merkels. So, and again, variety of calibers. Probably the most popular out of all of the entry levels are the 450, 400. Probably the best entry level double caliber you can get. Easy to shoot, tons of ammunition for it everywhere. They're all regulating around the same velocity, 2100, 400 grain bullet. Fabulous. Merkels. Then the Rosini came out about 4 or 5 years ago, and they have their Rhino series. There's 2 different versions of it. The Merkles are between, I just was looking on this morning, between 10 to 15K. I've seen a few at 9,500, but 9 is about as low as you can get on a Merkel, up to 15K for, especially the 500 seem to go for more money. Rosini rhinos, the Express, 9 to 12,000 range, dollar wise. Chapui, they're the Elan Classic, they're anywhere from 10 to 15K. And that's really kind of the entry, the beginning. Starting on the low end on the Sabati from a dollar perspective, about say 5,000 to 8,000, and then it pretty much goes from 9 to 12, 15, like that. I've shot all of them. I owned a Rossini. I've had friends that had Chapuis, but I've never shot one myself. And then you go into the mid tiers, and there's a sizable jump, and that's the Krieghoff Classic, the Big Five, and they go from 13 to 18,000. And then you have the Heim, and the Heim is I think that again the most popular PH double rifle out there, and they go from 13 to 18 to 21,000, kind of in that range. And then Heim has many models over the top of that, but their basic model is that price. And what you get between those models, especially the entry levels, is you get fit and finish differences. Triggers are a little sloppy on the Sabati. It's the wood to metal, is not as good as it could be, and that's why I highly recommend they get glass bedded. But you buy one for $6,000, you have a glass bed for $700 or $800. You get it fixed up, and you're still in it for way less than what you can do for the beginning levels of the mid tiers. I think out of the entry levels, the Merkel and the Chapuis, those are probably the two best ones in that range. Rossini's pretty good too. And then, the Krieghoff and the Heims. And what you get when you get the two of those German doubles is that you get 60 to 80 rounds of regulation. They shoot 2-inch groups, 50 yards, 4 shots. And as long as you stick with that factory ammo, they're lights out. It's basically like buying a modern bolt action rifle. It's you don't have near the problems. Great fit and finish, super durable, and really you save a little bit. Okay, you get put a good scope on a good bolt action rifle. You're probably in it for $4 or $5,000. So you're at the very bottom end of the entry level doubles. But I got to tell you, the Sabatis, the Merkels, the Rossinis, Chapuis, they just freaking shoot. They're tools. They're not going to win a beauty contest, but they just shoot. And you have a good gunsmith, which I highly recommend. Anybody has doubles, get a good gunsmith to make sure that it's all functional, especially if you buy a used one. And we're not even talking about the classics, right? The 50 to 120-year-old doubles. That's probably another discussion. We're just focused on the mid and the entry level. But you get a good gunsmith. JJ is probably the best of all the guns. I don't know if you've ever had him on your site. If you haven't, your podcast, you should. JJ Peridot, he's in Oklahoma. Great. Probably the number one guy. That's Mark says, Sullivan says, you only use him. Literally all the guys that I know that are dedicated, that's who they use, is JJ Peridot in Oklahoma.
So that was quite a list of companies there. A couple of them I'd never heard of before. Of course, I was familiar with Heim and Krieghoff and Sabati and whatnot. I'm glad to hear that their rifles are a lot better than they used to be. And it is nice to have some of the, saying inexpensive or budget in the same sentence as a double isn't really appropriate, but some that are less expensive than others out there. And then, of course, it just goes up in price from Heim and Krieghoff. So did I understand you correctly that you said that most PHs that carry a double rifle, they're probably using a Heim?
So I would venture to say that 50%.
Yeah.
I really believe that. Yeah. Buzz Carlton, all the ones so many of the ones I know, they have Heims and, the 89Bs and, just fantastic. Yeah. I think they dominate, and for good reason. You get a gun that's going to perform. It's funny. It's British designed and German engineered. That's literally what you get with those. Honestly, it has the same feel, that same, like a 12 gauge coming up. I mean, just smooth as can be, but they're super reliable. And they put the time in that the entry level companies can't do. They put the time in. I think I heard Chris Sells say that they shoot 80 rounds, 60 to 85 rounds in regulation. That's a lot of time. And, and they're tapping in, wedges in the front. I mean, they're doing it the right way. There's no tricks. One of the things that happened, in the original Sabatis was that there was gunsmiths all over the place doing weird stuff. I mean, carving out, some of the rifling on the crowns. I mean, Ken Owen said that on those 80 guns that he did, he had to cut off 1/8 of an inch of the barrel and recrown them because they were doing weird stuff to try to get them to not cross and do all kinds of stuff. But when you get a Heim, you get a Krieghoff, and I have more experiences personally with Krieghoff. That's when I was with that video I sent you where was with Buzz and 9 yards, and I shot that elephant, frontal brain shot. That Krieghoff is just lights out. I like the safety mechanisms of the Krieghoff. I like the decocking where it's not just a half a pound to knock the safety off to fire around, especially for traveling Boanas. The Krieghoff safety I really like, and I like
about the Krieghoff. So when you put it on safety, it actually decocks it. And
Correct.
when you take it off of safety, you said that it requires more force to do that because you're cocking the gun at the same time. I have heard some people say, and it may just be people blowing smoke that don't know what they're talking about, that some people don't like that just because it is a more effort to do that. What is the way? Is it forward to fire or backwards?
It's to decock it, you push it forward and then it slides back.
Okay. Yeah. So certainly a personal preference where some people like that, like you practice with it, you get used to it, it's no big deal. But there are other people that, that's a thing about a Krieghoff then, huh?
Oh, it's blondes and brunettes, man. And I know why the traditionalists don't like it, but I can tell you that the PHs I've dealt with, they love it because from a safety perspective of a traveling Boana who's maybe shot 20 or 30 rounds through his double.
Yeah.
And the only thing that's preventing them from getting a third orifice is that 8 ounces of safety pressure. There's a value to that, and whether or not, and again, a lot of the people that are buying these are it's for the first time, right? So they're buying them and they don't have a whole bunch of experience. If you do and you're used to a certain one, stay with it. I mean, of course, that makes sense. I know why they don't like it, but I see some value in it. And it shot really well. I shot a 470. And had a 470 Krieghoff Classic and just plain Jane, just shot lights out. I mean, just really, really, really good.
So when you buy a new production double, does the company tell you, hey, we regulated this with Hornady dangerous game ammo?
Yeah. And seems like that is, and I really do like the new Hornady bonded bullets. I had some issues with them in the old days, but they've changed. So they're fine. But a lot of manufacturers, as a matter of fact, Savati, that's all they use. They just load off DGS and GGX, and it's great. I mean, it's fabulous. But now a lot are doing the Federal because Federal has some of the best. I mean, they have the Woodley Well cores, they have the Swift A-frames, they have the breakaways. I mean, they have all the top tier, and that's a great thing. My goodness, almost every factory ammunition today, you really can't go wrong. It's what a change in the last 15 years where you were mandated to have to go reload and do all the things that you and I used to do. And if we wanted the right bullet, we had to go do it ourselves. We had to roll our own. And it's just not that way anymore. They're just amazing how they've jumped on board with that. But yeah, you're right. You buy that gun, and I think it was again Chris Sells. I just love this. He goes, you're gonna buy the car from us, but you want to build your transmission? No. We regulated for this ammo. You should probably use that ammo. And if you don't use that ammo, or if you have an older gun, especially one that was built around cordite and all of that, then Superior Ammunition Lonnie can help you.
Yeah, there you go. Fair enough. Now it seems like 470 Nitro Express is far and away the most popular cartridge used in especially modern production double rifles. Do you agree with that statement? And If so, what are some of the other cartridges that, which you say round out the top 5 in terms of popularity?
Yeah, I think that was the case for the majority of the last 20 years, 470, and for good reason. Just tons of ammunition. I'd love the 470. That 500 grain bullet at 2,100 feet a second will do everything. But I think it's changing. I think the number one now, I think they've lost their number one seed, and I'm sure there's people on this, the Heim folks, and maybe they'll say differently, but what I've heard, the 450, 400, 450, 400, it's literally exploding. It's much easier to shoot. It's much easier to master. The recoil is a third less, and I think that's taking over. But I would say that it's the 470, 450, 400, then 500, and a lot of 416s, and especially now we have the 416 number 2, a rimmed version of that. Those were, those are kind of in the top contention. And I'd say right now, growing more and more is the 500. More and more. I was talking to the district manager at Creekoff. He said, "We can't believe how many 500s we're selling a lot of them." So 500s are really coming up. Of course, the 577 is there. It's one of my favorite. I absolutely love shooting it. It's as much people hate it, I actually love it. I think it's got a fantastic recoil pulse. It's a slow push, especially when you have the right powders with it. And I got to tell you, that's another thing too. And in 450, which is the grandfather of all modern cartridges, the first one to leave black powder is the 450 Nitro Express. And, back in the early 1900s, unfortunately, the British government were using it for military, so they banned it. And Craig Waddington literally brought that back. And I'm so glad that he did. And Hornady makes ammunition for it, because the 450 is fantastic, beautiful, easy shooting, 480 grain bullets at 2,100. As long as you can keep the velo up to 2,100. I think those are your premier ones. There's everything else, the 500 465s, the 500 450s. Those are rare. The working is the 470, 450, 400, 416. There's a lot, especially like the entry level doubles. A lot of 416s, which really is rough, because if you shoot factory ammo in that, they were never made for that. So they press hard on the reliability on the entry level doubles when you have a 416. I literally tell people, when they have a Sabati 416, you absolutely need to have a glass bedded, because you will crack the stock right at the comb, 100%, because it's not made for 2,500 feet a second, or 2,450 even. And then the 500. I think those are your top ones.
What would you say that is the most popular cartridge used by PHs that are using a double? Are they using a lot on Elephant? They're using that 500?
500 and the 470. I think it's probably 470, just because it's so easy to get ammunition for. But more and more PHs that I talk to are doing the 500, and several of them 577.
Now, I have long wondered, I'm sure he used probably several different rifles, but I've long wondered what cartridge Mark Sullivan used in a lot of his videos. Do you know the answer to that question?
I do. And he's a historian on doubles. He's had pretty much all of them. When I was with him, he had his 500. He had it was a 500 John Wilkes, and he had a 577 that was a Army. I think it was an Army and Navy 577, if I remember correctly. 600 nitros, 700 nitros. He's pretty much had the whole realm. I think he now is back to the 577. He was using the 500s for a long time, but now he's pretty much sold back to his 577. He had Heim make a fantastic Mark Sullivan double built to his specs. The exact 5 inches on the recoil pad. A whole Mark Sullivan thing, the same cast. And Heim had that, Sullivan version of that, the Sullivan Professional Hunter version. I think he just bought Cal Pappas's like 2 months ago. He bought Cal Pappas's 600 Nitro. And he told me that he thinks it's the greatest double rifle he's ever owned in his life. Just absolutely loves it. So it's 600. So he's had them all. He's got a pretty big pretty big history of it. Yeah, and again, one of my favorite PHs is Mike Fell, renowned guy. I don't think there's anybody that's taken as many big elephants as he has for clients. He got charged and hooked and tossed and just missed his femoral here about 3 years ago when he was using his 458 double rifle, and he switched over. He's 577. He had alarm built, custom make a 577 for him. But I'm seeing that once the PHers are getting they're really good with their 500s, some of them are stepping up. But I got to tell you, I think the 500 out penetrates it. I think it penetrates better, especially with with today's solids. I don't think you can go too far wrong with the 500.
Well, you started off this podcast with a story of a situation where you wished you had a double. Do you have one that you can share with us where you are glad you did have a double?
Yeah, I don't think it wasn't a life or death situation had it made the shot the way it was with Mirage of Mayhem, but with Buzz Carlton and Kazuma, right in the middle of COVID, it was all crazy, floods like crazy, and we spent it was a 12-day safari, and for 7 or 8 days it was in the thickest, nastiest stuff, crawling through the brush. And I mean, I know anything but that Creekoff 470 would have been a handful to carry. And when it came down to the end, and you saw the video, when it came down to the end, when that elephant came in and he just decided he was coming, and he was 9 yards away. One of the things I have a guy I really loved his life. His name is Stan Senegren, and Stan Senegren was he was a control officer, and probably during control work probably took over 500 or 600 elephant. 500 is what he used, and what he said was, no elephant stands up to both barrels. If you have one elephant and you pull both barrels, those two 500 grain projectiles, which just nothing can stand up to it. Even if you miss the brain a little bit, they can't do it. And that's where I was really excited, not only being able to have the tradition and have the legacy of having a fine double with me that whole hunt, and Buzz having his 500 Heim, his 89V with him, but to be able to, when that elephant came in, have the confidence when I practiced pulling both barrels, and you just, it was instantaneous. It was gratifying. Once you learn where to follow the broomstick and, really pay attention to the anatomy, because it was right next to me. And so I had to literally shoot up the trunk to get into the brain, but they traveled 57 inches of penetration, two 500 grain, federal, and they were the, sledgehammers. Is what I was using, 500 grain sledgehammers, and they were just fantastic, man. Just worked really well.
Wait for him. Wait till he comes for us, and you can go. He is not a massive bull. That's why I want. If he comes for us, then it's awesome. But if not, we're gonna let him go. He's an old bull. He's just not very big. He's got some sunken in temples. Let's just wait and see what he does. Remember that distance, he can come quite fast. Okay. Yep. You doubled. Done like a professional. Safety on. And the frontal brain shot, which is, oh, look how low you had to go on the shot because his head was raised up, eh?
Yeah.
So you've done your homework, eh?
Well, you taught me to do the homework, looking for those zygomatics and just kind of keep chasing down for the broomstick.
And he's an ideal non-trophy bull. He's old. You can see his sunken in temples. He's a nice old bull, and potentially was never going to be a bull. He's reached that age where he's just never going to be a trophy. So he's an old bull. Very nice one to take as a non-trophy, and as I told you about it, all this meat goes to the forestry department, and that gets given to all their guards that do the anti-poaching, looking after this beautiful wilderness area we've been in. So hugely important. This meat will last them for 6 months worth of patrol. So that's a very important part of what we're doing.
Natural protein. How old do you think this bull is?
This will be a 40 plus bull.
Yeah.
And that'll be, I'd guess, over about 1,000 kgs of meat, of just meat alone on that day. And that's the big job tomorrow.
Yeah.
That was a really good one. And then I'll say one last one, which I sent you the video of with my hunting partner, Tony Perkins, hunting with Lukwap in South Africa. Totally undisturbed buffalo charged them, unwounded. And people talk about that. They're just basically bovines that are just, eating grass and doing all this stuff. No, this buffalo waited on top of this ridge for them, let them walk by 3 different times when they were chasing a sable. And finally they said, let's just get up on top and see if we can find the sable. And when they went up that rocky hill, and I had 2 friends that were with them on the hunt, also behind them, that witnessed the whole thing. And they got up to 19 yards from that buffalo. And that buffalo jumped up from that cover. He was literally looking over the whole valley. When he jumped up and came down, 416 CZ, 5 rounds in there, shooting 400 grain Barnes Bandit solids. And the first 2 were TSX 400 grainers. But when Tony shot, when he first came up, he just looked at him, and here he comes. And the first shot right through the shoulder here, doesn't stop him. As he's bolting, up comes the 500 Merkel from Chris, the PH, and Chris hits him right through the neck here, blows through, and you can just watch him rolling. And as he's rolling, Tony's now has solids in the gun, and he's literally zipping right through those on there. So you got to see the double and the magazine rifle in full action at 20 yards coming in.
Jeez, man, at 20
exciting.
yards, you can't have a lot of time to do anything, can you?
No. And what he said was amazing. He said that when the buffalo was dead, that 500 grain Barnes Bandit solid that hit him in the Merc when he shot him, when Chris, the PH, shot him, it went through and it exited. It took chunks of spine out that backside. So it bruised the neck and went out. And as he was rolling, Tony said that he was still looking at him. He's like, you bugger, And it looked like he missed and I said, what happened to your second and third shot? But when we slowed it down, you could actually see the solid was hitting him, and it was going through and blowing out dirt, blowing out the other side. But it was the double that just smooth came up on a full charge after taking the 416 TSX, perfect shot. I mean, it was a lethal shot on an unwounded buffalo at 20 yards. And then that one hit him so hard that it rolled him the rest of the way down the hill. It was really cool.
So did you say that the PH was using 500 grain Barnes Bandit solids in the double?
He was using 500 grain Barnes Bandit solids in his Merkel. Yep, he has a Merkel 140 AE. Yep.
All right, so they were both using Barnes bullets in this situation.
But Tony had the first 2 were TSX, and then 2 solids, and Chris had had only the Bandit solids across the whole thing. Yeah, in both barrels.
Shoot him. He was coming. He was coming.
Very interesting. So that, I think, is a great story to end on. So we're going to hit pause. I'm going to ask you a question, and then we're going to get you to tell us a little bit more about double rifles here in a second. So I'm going to ask you the question I ask everyone on the show this year. You must choose one to hunt with for the rest of your life. You can use either a single cartridge, and you can use any bullet in that cartridge. So you could choose a 30-06 and use whatever you want in it. Or you can hunt with a single bullet and use that bullet in any cartridge. You could choose a Barnes TSX or whatever and use it in a 223 or a 470 or whatever. What is your selection?
Yeah, I think it's because I could really go between 2, but if I have to choose one, I think I'm going to go with the 500 Nitro Express and using a woodlay. I'd use a woodlay, and I would use a hydro because it has some tremendous effects. And so for me, if I did nothing else but hunt buffalo the rest of my life, it would be it. And that's my setup.
Well, good. I would expect nothing less from a guy that is part of the Double Rifle Society to choose a double rifle cartridge for his selection. So very good. And while it's not necessarily something that would be, I would say, tailor-made for hunting white-tailed deer or hogs, you could darn sure do it, though.
Well, you only gave me one, and that's what.
Yep. No, that's totally fine. So very good. So let's say you got a guy that's listening to this show. They think double rifles are cool. They want to learn more about it. Maybe they want to buy their own one day. What do they need to do? What's a good place to start?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things that that I would recommend. For first off, Double Rifle Society is a great starting point. There's about 3,000 dedicated users there. That we have about 60 subject matter experts from almost every manufacturer for at least 100, 150, probably 200 PHs now. We have the manufacturers, we have the optics manufacturers. They're all part of Double Rifle Society now. We have about just a little south of 3,000 members, but we're growing, 300-400 members every week. It's really starting to take off. Ryan Stone, this was his brainchild, and he brought me on after the first week, and he didn't have to twist my arm. Of course, it's a volunteer group, but our whole thing is about entertainment, about education and conservation. So we're doing a lot of raffles. We had Mike Fell's 500 John Wilkes 1911 double rifle that we just raffled off, all the money going to Blood Origins, to Robbie Kroger's group. We have another 450 400 right now. And that one is, we still have 300 tickets left on that. So get on there. It's $100 a ticket. We cap them at, it's not that many tickets. I think it's only 500 that we sell total. I'm pretty sure. But so we do raffles. It's pretty exciting. It's a place to go and ask questions and get involved in that. I also gave you a list of the books that I highly recommend. You can show that in there, and including Graham's book, but also our friend Kevin Robinson. I refer to this book. This is like my Bible. I mean, I don't agree with everything Kevin said because I know he hates my 416. He'll laugh at me every time we talk about it. But nobody's done. Yeah, there you go. Nobody's done more modern work than him on that. And as far as shot selections and all the things that we know, he literally changed the way people go. Changed the discovery that people have going to Africa. So that's an important one. And I have a list of my favorite books too. I call them the Magnificent Seven. It's all, all of the top ones. So you can, for your viewers, they can take a look at that. I think they'll be, pretty excited about that. And I'm also a moderator for Big Bore Rifles Africa. It's another great site, Big Bore Rifles Africa. We have about 14,000 members in that group. It's, again, some of the biggest names in the business. Great place to go and ask questions. I love both of those sites because there's no BS. I mean, you don't find people hammering you for a journeyman question about that. If you have a question about, hey, this caliber versus this caliber, those are the two sites. Double Rifle Society and Big Bore Rifles Africa are places to go. Books, Graham Wright, for sure. The Woodley Manual, those are really, really important ones. And Graham's book is called Shooting the British Double. To me, it's almost biblical. It's what started me. And if you get to that book, and now the 4th edition's out, it has a black cover on it, and you can get those for I think $50. And they used to be, I paid to get Graham's book 8 years ago. I paid $250 for it because they were out of print. Now they're back in print. And then there's two other sites that I think are really they started this whole thing going. Africa Hunting, that site there's a wealth of information in there. They started this whole thing, back 15 years ago. So you can always go find information there. And the other one is Nitro Express Forums. Nitro Express Forums, Jack Ham's group. They have tremendous articles, tremendous detail. Some, again, the best names in the business If you stick with those sites, you're going to get some really good answers. I think from a gunsmith perspective, as we talked about before, you can't go wrong with, you can absolutely not go wrong if you can get, he's 6 months out though, but if you can get JJ Hurdo to do your gun, Ken Owens, the other one, and, Superior Ammunition. If you have those connections right there, you pretty much have everything you need to do to get started in double rifles. And it's a matter of, Guns International. I mean, literally, you should just have it where they're pinging you when double rifles come up. They send you, notice if you're starting to get serious about it, there's no better place. I really find them to I was on there this morning to try to get pricing to see, because everything went up. By the way, I'm really glad I looked at that, because when you asked me that question, hey, what are the price ranges? They were like 2,000-3,000 less. So they're starting to ratchet up, even for the entry level dogs.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, you have dropped a lot of knowledge on us today about double rifles. You answered a lot of questions that I've had for a long time, and I'm sure some of my listeners have had as well. So, Julius, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us on the show today, share some of your knowledge and experience with us. Maybe we'll get you back on again in the future to talk about some of the stuff that we didn't talk about today, like maybe some of the older double rifles out there, too.
Love them. Yeah, the Holland Hollands and the Rigby's and the Wesley Richards. I mean, there's some fantastic. It's a whole premise of tradition that I'd love to get into that. I'm not as good as as some of the folks, but I'm pretty passionate about it now, and I'd love to talk to you about that. And even custom wildcatting. Maybe we can do another session. I've been custom wildcatting, since 1983, and so I love the long range stuff, and so love to spend some more time with you. Thanks for having me on board. We really, on behalf of myself and Ryan Stone, my partner at Double Rifle Society, thank you so much, John, for having us on, and look forward to more.
Sounds good. Thanks. Okay, I really enjoyed that interview. I hope you did too. And I'm not sure about you, but man, I am kind of jonesing to go out and buy and shoot and hunt with a double rifle after all of that. If you're interested in learning more about all of this, go to doubleriflesociety.com. You can enter the various raffles they are putting on there that Julius mentioned, and you can also give the Double Rifle Society a follow on social media via their webpage too. Julius and the rest of the guys there are a fantastic resource for those wanting to learn more about double rifles, or if you just want to join a group of people with similar interests. Now, it has not started yet as I record this, but the Double Rifle Society will be doing another raffle in the near future where the winner will receive all sorts of goodies, to include a hunt in Africa and the original artwork from Kevin Robertson's book, The Perfect Shot. Link to the Double Rifle Society webpage is in the episode description. And finally, if you are looking to book your dream hunt in Africa, visit bestsafarihunt.com or email me, john@thebiggamehuntingblog.com. We will set you up with an amazing hunt. Remember, you can make your dream hunt turn into a reality, and we can help. Thanks for listening. I'll see you back here next time on the Big Game Hunting Podcast.